My name's Emma Greenhalgh. I work at Solace on the Women's Rough Sleeping Census alongside a collaboration of other organisations, including Single Homeless Project. This recording is specifically about the local insights meetings and will provide a very brief overview of the census before covering in more detail what the local insights meetings are, how to prepare, how they will run, and what you'll need to do if you're leading a local insights meeting. So a brief overview of why we need a women's census. We know that women experience violence and abuse as a cause and/or consequence of homelessness and rough sleeping. Women can therefore make sure they're less visible from people who could harm them, including strangers, members of the public, and so on. This can then mean that actually support that goes out looking for people who are rough sleeping don't see women, and they're therefore not included in statistics or getting support. Funding streams and commissioning that are driven by data that we have on rough sleeping therefore don't really include women because women aren't there in the statistics. This results in a lack of specialist services and accommodation for women, and that in turn creates a cycle where women are still experiencing violence and abuse and therefore having to make themselves less visible in order to manage that. For more background information, you can find written and recorded resources on the census website, which will tell you more about the background of the Women's Census and why we're doing this piece of work. So how does the census work? There are two components to the census. The first is the census survey. This is where outreach teams conduct the survey with women they meet on gender-informed shifts. Services from a range of different sectors can conduct the survey with women they support during the census week. And services might also come together to host women's census sessions in their borough, for example, day centres or other key local hotspots. Census week is all about trying to get responses from women to that survey. The second part of the census comes after Census Week, and this is the Local Insights Meeting. This is where local services will come together to submit basic data about the number of women they work with and have a conversation about local challenges and possible ways forward. The census uses a gender-informed definition of rough sleeping for both the census survey and the Local Insights Meetings. As on the screen, this definition is quite broad and is essentially about having nowhere safe to stay at all or very precarious forms of homelessness. It includes more visible forms of rough sleeping, as well as walking around all night, sitting in fast food restaurants or in A&E waiting rooms, sitting in train stations or on buses all night. And women might not do this every single night, sometimes interspersing rough sleeping with other forms of homelessness. So what is the Local Insights Meeting? This is where services in each area, borough, local authority come together in a meeting to share the numbers of women that they're working with who they know or are concerned are rough sleeping. Services and practitioners at the meeting also discuss experiences and the local challenges they face in supporting women experiencing rough sleeping. The meetings draw on knowledge of local services to provide a more accurate and inclusive estimate of women known to be in this situation in that area, including those who weren't visible during Census Week or couldn't do the census survey. This is in contrast to the census survey, which allows us to hear from women themselves about their experiences and collect important data and information that we can use for building effective services for women. One meeting should be delivered for each area or borough. In combined authorities, it's likely most helpful to do one per local authority. The meeting should be led either by your local census organiser or someone who's been appointed to lead within the borough, for example, the rough sleeping lead. And it's very helpful for this lead to have awareness and relationships with multiple organisations within the borough so that they can make sure the right services are invited and attending. As with the survey, the meeting is most effective when it includes as many organisations and sectors as possible, but only one or two people from each service need to attend. If you are attending a Local Insights meeting on behalf of your team or service, you'll need to prepare some information in advance. Alongside your colleagues, you'll need to compile a list of women that your service is working with or are aware of prior to the meeting. In this list, you should include women who you've worked with or have been known to your service in the past 3 months, and who you know have experienced rough sleeping at any point within the last 3 months. Rough sleeping means the census gender-informed definition, which you can find in the guidance. And this list should include initials and date or year of birth so that you can provide more information if you need to in the meeting. If your service doesn't record case management information, or doesn't have that level of information about service users, or you can't share it, simply note the total number of women who you work with who meet the criteria. You can also note down any women who you are aware of but don't have details for. For example, you might have seen them and think they're rough sleeping, but they've never come to your service or never given you their name. How will the data be used? All services attending a meeting will need to design a data sharing protocol in advance. Any initials noted during the meeting will only be used for the purposes of confirming any shared cases within the meeting. This information will then be deleted after the meeting or may not be recorded at all. We know that still not all services will be able to share their data in that way, but we encourage you to still attend the meeting or the second half of the meeting if you can, as your input to the discussions and your perspectives are still really valuable. So what will happen at the Local Insights meeting? At the meeting, the person leading the meeting will address each service in turn and ask for the number of women that service has worked with who meet the census criteria. The lead for the meeting will check for shared cases between the services. Any shared cases will be noted as duplicates so that the meeting organiser can calculate an accurate number of women who are rough sleeping in the borough. After the figures have been collected, the meeting organiser will facilitate a conversation with everyone in the meeting about the experiences and needs of women who are experiencing rough sleeping within the borough, any particular difficulties in trying to provide effective support to women, and any learnings from conducting the census. More information can be found online to help you prepare for the Insights meeting, and you might want to check in with your local organiser to ensure that you've got the date and invitation for your Local Insights meeting, which will likely happen in October. The next part of this recording will provide information for those organising or leading their Local Insights meeting. So, leading your Local Insights meeting. Before the meeting, if you're leading the meeting, you will need to invite the relevant local services and provide them with the guidance that is online. You'll need to edit the data sharing protocol to include the names of everyone who's attending and ask services to sign and return this in advance of the meeting. You'll need to remind services who are attending to prepare the information described in the guidance and in these slides, and you may wish to send several reminders about this. You'll also need to familiarise yourself with the meeting workbook, which should be completed during the meeting by you as the lead or another appointed person that you might want to ask to take notes. During the meeting, the data should be collected by you or an appointed lead in the Insights meeting workbook. This is an Excel spreadsheet or available as a Word document that you can use, and we'll go through that in this session. You can use the information on the meetings that is provided in the census guidance for organisers so you can be prepared. And after the meeting, a reminder that you'll need to delete any personal data that you store in the workbook. So how will the meeting work? At the start, you'll need to introduce the meeting and explain how things will go and the agenda. Check that everyone attending has signed the data sharing protocol, and it's worth reiterating the criteria for the data that will be submitted within the meeting. You can see the guidance or workbook or these slides for a reminder of that. The meeting agenda will be collecting numerical data from each services and cross-referencing for any duplicate clients, again using the meeting workbook. Then facilitating a discussion with the challenges that services encounter when supporting women to exit rough sleeping, again recording in the workbook. And facilitating a discussion to debrief on the census week as it went in your area. So we'll now go through what the workbook looks like and how to complete it. On the first page or sheet of the Excel spreadsheet, you'll need to enter the area that your meeting covers, as well as the date and name of the facilitator of the meeting. And this page or sheet contains brief instructions for before and during the meeting, including how to use the workbook. The second page of the workbook is where you'll need to enter the data that each service provides you with during the meeting. So when you get to this page, you'll need to go to each service in turn and ask for the following information. In the first column, input their organisation names so that you know which services have already provided data and you can keep track during the meeting. In the next column, use the drop-down list to select which type of organisation or service they run. And in the third column, write down the number of women they say they've been working with and who have been rough sleeping in the previous 3 months. A reminder of the criteria and definitions is in the guidance, as well as in a page towards the end of this workbook. You'll then want to go to the duplicates matching section over on the right. You should ask each service to read out their list of women with initials and or year of birth. Other services who are in the meeting should say if they think they're working with that same person. If so, write down in the next column how many services in the meeting are working with that one person. in the column to the right of that, -1 from the number of services you just entered and enter this new number. It's important that you only enter a service as working with that woman if they are also providing a list of initials in this meeting. This is so that you can take away from the meeting an accurate number of those rough sleeping. If a service is attending the meeting and won't be providing a list of initials, you don't need to account for them in the duplicates table. If services can't provide any identifying information about the women they work with, so they can't provide those initials or they don't know them, they can provide a number without any further detail. So they can say, we've worked with about 8 women over the last couple of months who have been rough sleeping over the past 3 months. This number should only go in the box which says number of unrecorded women. Otherwise, again, this will result in inaccurate figures when you get your totals back for the data meeting and for your number of women rough sleeping in your area. As you can see with the little red corners of these boxes, there are notes in there to kind of provide a bit more information and remind you of what you need to do and how to use it. You'll also notice that in the box on the right hand side at the top, the totals will automatically calculate when you enter figures in either the two other tables. You don't need to do anything with those, they should calculate themselves, an autofill, but these are the numbers that you'll come back to and use at the end of the meeting. Once your meeting is finished, you can delete the initials and year of birth that you might have recorded here. This shouldn't affect the totals in the final totals box, it's just for keeping track for you during the meeting. Once you've finished the data capture section, you can move on to page 3 and facilitate the discussion with the local services. There are notes on this page to guide you on how to record the details and lead the discussion. There are also suggested prompts and themes that you might want to raise to kind of encourage people to start talking on what they might want to bring up from their services. And there are different boxes in which you can write the main themes that come up from the different services. You can write much more in this page if you would like to, but it might not all be recorded in the final report, but it might be useful for your local area's information. The final part of the meeting you can do on page 4, which is the census debrief. If all the local services have taken part in the census, it will be very helpful to go through conduct a short discussion on their experiences of the census week, what went well, what didn't go well, for example, and there are suggested prompts and themes in this box here, and a box in which you can record all that information or notes of that information. There are 2 additional pages in the workbook. Page 5 is detailing for local organisers and leads what they need to do after the meeting, so how you can use the information, what you need to check for, what you need to delete and where you need to send it to. There is also a page labelled definitions and criteria, and as I mentioned, this is a page which reminds you of the criteria for inclusion in the local insights meeting and of the census definition of women's rough sleeping. After your insights meeting has been completed, if you are the meeting organiser, you'll need to delete any initials or identifying information from the workbook as soon as possible. As mentioned, these work for keeping track during the meeting itself, and you don't need them afterwards for calculating totals. If the census organiser and the meeting organiser are different people, you'll need to send the data securely to the organiser for your area. The census organiser will then need to check the data for any personal or identifying information that's accidentally been entered or left in, because all of that data that's sent to them should now be entirely anonymous. The census organiser will then need to check the slides and guidance provided to organisers for the processes for submitting census data to the National Census team for the research report. Thank you very much for listening to this recording and for taking part in the census. If you've got any questions, you can contact the census team on womens.census@soliswomensaid.org. You can also find guidance, recording and further resources as mentioned in this recording on the census webpage, and that's soliswomensaid.org/women's rough sleeping census. If you are organising the census in your area, you should have received further resources directly from the census team. Contact the census team if you're missing any of the resources that are mentioned in this recording or you're not sure about anything. Thank you.